And good morning. Welcome to Robin's blog update for July 21st. So I'm back out on the balcony. It's a bit cool today, but reasonable temperature, unlike a few weeks ago when we had that heat wave. It's gotten back down to 21 degrees. So everything's good, and getting out there and exercising a lot still, doing a lot of bike rides. Trying to get out every day and trying out some new trips. So you got to take advantage of the weather while it's here. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about my musical history and influences. I don't know if I've mentioned this, I probably have, but I started guitar in 1972 when I was 10. So you can add the years to that and figure out how old I am. So I've been playing a long time. So basically 48 years now. So I started with group lessons in 72, which was like one teacher and I can't remember, 6 to 8 students sitting there in a row. It was really stupid now that I remember it, because you just sat there most of the time not doing anything as each student was tested on something and they would go down the line. A really ridiculous concept for teaching. And they were just trying to make money. So I don't remember getting much out of that. I do remember I was probably not learning things properly, or I was lazy, whatever, but I did a test there and I failed it completely. So then I had to redo the test and do some proper study. I guess I was not too serious at this time. And then we ended up having a concert recital. This was in Edmonton, where I was living up to 73. So this by 72, I was still in Edmonton. And then we had a concert in Calgary for the whole group. So that was actually my first live show, and that was within a year of starting. But it was like an ensemble thing where we all sat around and played the same piece. Now, another stupid thing, I ended up studying the wrong piece of music. I don't know why, but I ended up having to go to this thing, and everybody went there, my parents, family, and I remember still sitting there in the middle of this group, just pretending to play along, because it was a completely different piece that I didn't know. And this wouldn't have been anything really complicated. It was probably some popular song of the time. But that was really a strange experience for the first live show, having not studied the right piece of music. So an auspicious debut, but at least it wasn't a solo show. So anyway, at the time I started guitar, I had already been well immersed in music, since my dad was playing music for 10 years since I had been born. It was in the house all the time. So he really was the big influence for me to get into music, because I grew up with 50s music and of course 60s music. I still remember running around the house singing I Can't Get No Satisfaction. And that was probably around the time it was on the radio in like 65. And I remember, that song standing out in my mind. Now, my dad used to record his music off the radio, which was a show called Jukebox Saturday Night. So that was just your typical, throw everything in there radio program. And of course, it was mostly 50s and 60s music at the time. So I had a really good exposure to everybody of that time, whether it was Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, even Pat Boone. They played everything on that channel from that time. Rolling Stones, Creedence. So Dad recorded these 8-track tapes off the radio show, and that's what I remember listening to all the time, because he would play them in the house, he'd play them in the car. So I became, used to these collections of songs, and I knew them inside out. So I knew, if I heard one song from the Beach Boys, I knew exactly what it was going to lead to because you've been hearing this over and over. So it's like, yeah, this is coming up, or this song's coming up, and oh, I can't wait for that song to come up. So I became, more interested in songs and styles because of this, and it was really a good upbringing for teaching me about all these styles. So of course guitar songs started to stand out for me, and in particular the number one song that stood out for me, and was probably the biggest influence in my youth, was a song called Torquay by the Fireballs. Now that would have been Jimmy Gilmore and the Fireballs, who did Sugar Shack, which was a popular song with vocals in the 60s. So I was doing this instrumental thing, which is similar to the Ventures and the Shadows, but that song really stood out for me. So every time I remember knowing when that song was coming up on the 8-tracks, I got really excited. It was like, oh yeah, here it comes. And just 2 minutes of pure guitar bliss. That's probably really what pushed me. That and hearing Creedence Clearwater Revival. Dad was heavily into them. He had 8-tracks from greatest hits from them. So I was hearing this all the time as well. One of the first songs I ever learned was probably Down on the Corner, the bass line. Probably was like 10. And do 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 this thing. So just sitting there with my acoustic guitar playing this riff. And my favorite song from Creedence at the time, which I also always loved, was what was it? Heard It Through the Grapevine, because of the extended guitar solo. And there was one other one they did with an extended guitar solo, and I can't remember the name of it now. Susie Q. And of course on 8-track, the songs always faded out on the first channel and then faded in again as it switched to second channel. That was the worst thing about 8-tracks. So that's really the whole idea of guitar solos got ingrained in me. I mean, something like Torquay was the basic feel, the surf guitar coolness factor. To me, it seemed incredibly cool. And Creedence was the next one because of the extended guitar solos. And I always loved John Fogerty's playing. I thought he was a great solo player. He seemed to get worse over the years, and then he got better again. He sort of had these peaks and valleys in his playing. But the Creedence stuff really was hard to match. And of course, there were other guitar players that were doing extended solos at the time, but my dad didn't have any Jimi Hendrix. I don't think I heard Hendrix till quite a bit later. So I was Rolling Stone, Johnny Cash, Marty Robbins, lots of country music, even things like Nana Muscuri and Heino, because my parents were German, so they played a lot of traditional German music as well. So I had James Last, Heino. It was bizarre, going from Creedence to Heino in one day. So yeah, I was getting a nice exposure to different kinds of music. Now my dad was also a musician, self-taught. He played harmonica, and he played it really well. So I was always surrounded by his harmonica playing, and he'd be playing traditional German songs plus his versions of Roy Orbison songs. My one regret that I never got full recordings of him on video doing his repertoire. He died about 2.5 years ago in his sleep, and I have only little short clips of him playing harmonica. So that was my one regret. So yeah, he made it to like 79, and then he had a complete pulmonary failure. It was years of alcohol abuse and cigarette smoking. And he also had cancer about 2 years before he died, bladder cancer. And he had his bladder removed. So, Dad is a typical German tough guy who didn't want to go to doctors. So even though he had trouble pissing for 6 months and had pain, he didn't go until it was too late. He finally went, and they said, well, you've got cancer. So, he had that removed, and I think that scared him. So I'm not sure. I think the cancer might have actually come back too, but he basically had a full breakdown of his cardiovascular system. So he went peacefully in his sleep, and in that way I was really glad, because he didn't have any extended pain. I mean, I was talking to him just a few days before that. And I hadn't talked to him for like 10 years because of his alcohol abuse. but we had reconnected at least 10 years before he died, and we were in contact on the phone. Now, he never had internet, so again, he used to ask me, hey, what does .com mean? I saw this on TV. So he had no clue about internet, and it was probably good, because he avoided a lot of the garbage that comes with having internet access. So he just had his music on CDs, because I would burn him CDs of anything I could think of that he would like, and I kept doing that every time we went over to visit. I'd bring him some more CDs. I couldn't communicate through email, so it's just basically the phone and visiting. So he was living in a trailer out in Mission, and he basically lost all his money because of the alcohol problems and the divorce from my mother, and that was like mid-90s. So he basically took his money and spent it on booze, and then there was this really, really bad time for 10 years where I just couldn't even talk to him anymore, because I was just disgusted by the stories I was hearing about him from my sister. So anyway, it ended well because we did reconnect, and I was visiting him a lot. So he kept his mind together, and he was still totally into music right until the end. So that's what I took from him. Nobody else got this in the family. My brother and sister are not musical. My mother was not musical. I think my brother had brief accordion lessons, but obviously no kid is going to stick with accordion lessons. So that was out. So anyway, when I had started lessons in '72, I was sort of slightly into guitar, probably saw it more as a hassle going for lessons, because I remember that I would take the bus by myself all the way downtown, and it's funny in those days, send your 10-year-old kid out to do that stuff. I don't know if people would do that now. We didn't have phones, but you were trusted to go and do your thing without any parental guidance. And lessons went on for about another 5 years. So once we moved out of Edmonton and hit Abbotsford, I was taking lessons at Nick's Music, which was a religious store. That was another problem there. That did not help my impression of lessons. So I think generally my whole impression of the 5 years of lessons was negative. I never had really good teachers. I had maybe two while I was at Nick's Music, and I was surrounded by really grotesque chick comics. If you know about these, they were like comics that would give you the warning about committing a sin. It would be a story of some man doing something like stealing a candy bar who would end up burning in hell. So we'd have these really heavy messages on the end of these comics, like just people in the hellfire. And I used to browse these things while I was in the store, and I was just totally freaked out by it. It's like, oh, read about burning in hell, go in for guitar lesson, come out, read about burning in hell, over and over and over again. So anyway, I did not like lessons because I was constantly being forced to learn songs I didn't like and styles I didn't like. And that was, in those days, they had to pay a lot of money to get copyrights for songs to teach them. So most of these Alfred books never paid for that. So you would have to dig back 100 years, some ancient country music, and learn those songs. It was just ridiculous. So I was hearing all this good music at home, Creedence and Stones and Tom Jones, and go to a lesson to learn something from, the Carter family from 1912. So you can imagine how I was reacting to this. I was like, this sucks. And they forced me to learn it, and then I wouldn't learn it properly, and they'd make me do it again the next week. So basically paying, constantly having to learn the same garbage over and over again. And I had no interest in it. Occasionally you might get a John Denver song in there, and that was pretty rare. I didn't really care for, Sunshine on My Shoulders makes me happy. So it was pretty bad. So eventually I told my mother, look, I am not getting anything out of this. By the time I was 15, and I said, you're wasting your money on these lessons because I don't like the material. I'm better off learning by myself at home. I've got my Elvis albums. I think that was my first records they gave me in the end of '77 after Elvis died. So I still remember that in August of '77. Then I got the big greatest hits collection of 6 albums for Christmas, and I used to actually sing along to those songs. That was one of the few times I really got into singing, was just trying to mimic Elvis. So by 77 I had progressed a bit with getting into Nashville guitar, so I was doing a lot of finger picking and thumb picking, Merle Travis songs. That became a little more interesting for me at that time because of the finger picking style. So I was already doing this way before Dire Straits and hearing all that stuff. So that was my last year that I did it, lessons. And then I stuck out on my own and just started buying albums, starting with the Rolling Stones. Every album they had. It was like 78. And then I went on to Devo, also because they covered Satisfaction. And then slowly picking up on other guitar players. So in the 70s, it would have been all the 70s guys, so I started with Rory Gallagher, getting his albums, UFO, Michael Schenker, the Scorpions, Uli Roth. These were all huge influences. Jeff Beck, big influence. I got Blow by Blow album. I was learning songs from that at 15. And then Mick Taylor from the Rolling Stones, a huge influence. Time Waits for No One was one of my favorite songs, and again one of my favorite songs from the Stones. Learning that solo note for note. And what other guitarists? Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top. I had all the ZZ Top albums. Pat Travers, Pat Thrall, who was his guitar player and also with Automatic Man. And Ronnie Montrose, another big one. I had all his records, his solo albums, his acoustic album, Open Fire. This was a big influence, hearing acoustic playing done well instead of just rock solos. So Frank Marino, he was another one, Canadian guy, Mahogany Rush, very advanced player, very fast. So I was surrounded by all these amazing guitar players and soaking it in, basically learning all that stuff. So nowadays I get, people are always saying, oh, you sound like Santana, or you sound like Mick Taylor, and other people. Well, you're going to get little bits of that in your playing. So heavy album buying from like 78 to 85 or so, just picking up every single guitarist around. And then of course by the early 80s it got away from guitar and got into new wave, and then I didn't really care. I was not a fan of 80s music at all. I think that's when I got into like Miles Davis and other instrumentalists, and world music, African music. And I didn't really care about Duran Duran or any of that other keyboard-oriented music. So in that time too, I remember always trying to come up with stuff for my dad, because he had, every time I'd go visit my parents, he'd have the music on, so I would find something like the Fabulous Thunderbirds, which is a group, Jimmy Vaughan on guitar, another big influence, much more of an influence than Stevie Ray Vaughan. Never really cared about Stevie Ray Vaughan. I found him okay. I much preferred Jimmy Vaughan's playing because he was like a rhythm monster and also kept his solos very precise, very short. And we saw them in '86, and I was always happy that I got to take my parents to that show here in Vancouver at a place called the Town Pump in Gastown, which lasted from about the early '80s to the early '90s, but I saw everybody there. Every band you can think of came by, and it was cheap, like $5 to $10, and you could have dinner and sit in front of the stage, and people were dancing, and they had a second level, and I remember seeing the Thunderbirds, and it was just a great show. And so I was really happy to get my dad out to some of these concerts, because I had given him these albums a few years previous, and he was totally into it because of what's his name, Kim, the harmonica player singer. I can't remember his last name now, but his first name's Kim, and he was a great player. So my dad would play around and play along with all these blues songs, and he was totally into the blues. So it was really nice to share this music and give it back to him. So that was always my goal. Every time I went to my parents, have some new cassette tapes, some new music to give him, because I knew he was going to enjoy it. The only thing I regret now is we never kept those 8-tracks. Between the time of his alcoholism and moving and between houses and things, I think a lot of his stuff got trashed. I would have loved to have had those Saturday night, Jukebox Saturday Night compilations to listen to now, in all those songs in the order that I remember as a kid. That would have been great, but of course it's too late for that. So anyway, that's sort of my beginnings in music. And you know, when I grew up as a kid, most kids in school were into things like Kiss, and I was like, what is this Kiss? I was still into Creedence and the Stones. And you know, when I heard Honky Tonk Woman the first time, I was just like blown away. I remember that being a big influence as well. So starting off with all those albums and then building up the collection and then just going through everything and learning solos from every guitar player till I knew everything. And I probably went on with that for too many years, where I was just looking for challenges. You know, you work your way up, you know, starting with Mick Taylor and Dire Straits, which I found actually quite easy at the time, and then getting into something challenging like Al Di Meola, you know, who was probably the most advanced technical guitarist of that time, late 70s, early 80s. So right now, that's what I think about when I'm thinking about my father, is just how much he gave me in music, and I was so happy to be exposed to not only, you know, one genre, but like every genre. It was like doo-wop, you know, going back to the 50s and all these Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry. I mean, it just goes on and on. I heard all of it. And I think it was my goal over the years to try to at least copy songs from every band I knew as a kid, you know, like go through that. It's like, oh, I'm going to learn some Buddy Holly songs today. And the next day I'm going to learn some Creedence or Chuck Berry or some Johnny Cash, you know, even Marty Robbins. I was playing El Paso on like thumb and fingerstyle guitar. I used to actually play a lot of complicated fingerstyle songs a few years ago. All my videos are on YouTube of that phase. That was just to challenge myself and get the thumb and fingerstyle going really as good as I could get it. And then eventually I dropped it because it was too much work learning these songs. And it didn't make any difference when I was playing them on the street. That was a big problem. My experience on the street, you know, I tried all the complicated stuff in acoustic style, nobody cared. I didn't get paid at all. It was like, it's too quiet, people don't care how complex it is. They don't recognize things. Most people don't care. And they don't know what level you're at. You could play something really stupid and simple and people go, oh. You know, I remember that feeling too, playing something really easy like Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, and somebody just going gaga over it, and I couldn't understand it. I was like, well, this is really simple. It's like the simplest chords, but that's all has to do with memory and your feeling about music, a song that means something to you. That's what gets you the reaction. So when I started, you know, playing and making money on the street, it was more music that would get a reaction from people. I had to figure out, okay, this Santana song seems to do well most of the time, or this Dire Straits song, or this ZZ Top LaGrange, something that kind of crossed a lot of borders and age groups, and had to whittle it down. So I just chucked out all this technical stuff. I chucked out everything that was not recognizable, unless of course it was my own jams. But that's how it ended with busking. So up until 1974, I was just doing these lessons at Nick's Music, and then my next big influence came into the picture, and that was $6 Million Man TV show. Now that started probably already in 1973 because I saw the first show, the first movies, but January of '74 the series started. Well, that's when I first heard Oliver Nelson's music for the show. Now that was a huge thing for me because I loved the show, not only because of the bionic action and, you know, seeing that every week. It was 50% of the coolness factor was the music from Oliver Nelson, and he was concentrating mostly on funk and bass, heavy themes and cues, and all really catchy, going together with the slow motion scenes of Steve Austin doing things, running and jumping. It was the ultimate coolness thing for me. So I never missed the show, and I recorded it every week on a Panasonic recorder. That was my first high-tech device that I owned. So any decent TV shows, I always taped them. $6 Million Man, I taped it every week. So the first 3 seasons, so basically 74 to 76, I was recording them all the time. So I got to listen to this music over and over again because I would, after the show was over, I would listen to it again in bed at night, just put the speaker up on my pillow and enjoy the show again. That was like our VCR of the 70s. Didn't have any VCRs yet, so I just had to listen to audio. So I then really would get even more into the music because that was what was driving the whole show, was the audio. And that was a huge thing for me. Still my favorite composer of any of them for any TV show. He died like 75, so near the end of the second season, and he was quite young. But he came from a heavy jazz background, and Oliver Nelson had been recording jazz in the early 60s already. And it was funny because I remember seeing his name on the end of the credits, and it was like Oliver Nelson. And somehow I always thought it was a white guy. It sounded like it's an old white guy. Who has a name like Oliver? And then it was years later when I found out he was actually black, and it really surprised me. But now when I listen to the music, it makes more sense, looking at his music background. So great themes in that show, and I used to start playing them again on acoustic guitar, just these great motifs for bass, great lines. And I think around this time I started getting fed up with the acoustic guitar because it was so hard to play. I wasn't getting a lot of volume out of it. So sometime in '75 I saw the guitar of my dreams at Nick's Music. It was a Sunburst, a Les Paul copy from my company called Man, which later became Ibanez. So M-A-N-N. And I started picking that up and playing it in the store, and I was like, wow, this is so easy. Like, there was like super low action and short neck. It was just worlds of difference from the acoustic that I was playing, which was really hard to bar chords. And so I started to get my eye on this guitar, and I think it was like $250. But by the end of '75, I was making it clear that I wanted this for Christmas for my parents. And then the whole color, the whole Sunburst thing, I was totally enamored with this. And I remember having some problems in school around September, October, November of '75, where I got in trouble and I had to go to the principal's office. And then I was really worried that I wouldn't get the guitar because my parents found out about this. And I'm sure they weren't happy about it. But I was like, oh no, this is going to kill my chances to get this guitar. And Christmas came around, which was Christmas Eve. Because we're German background, we always celebrated on Christmas Eve and opened gifts at that time. I remember opening some gifts, and I got my stuff, and I thought, okay, well, I guess no guitar. I had some other things, and then I was resigning myself to this. And then I went in the kitchen to get some food, and I came back out, and there was the bright floodlight of my dad's Super 8 camera shining on the tree. And in front of the tree was this Sunburst Les Paul copy with an amplifier. It was a 15-watt amplifier. So I was just ecstatic, freaking out. And I still have video of this, or film of this moment when my dad filmed me. Dad was filming everything from like 1970 to 1980 on Super 8. And one thing I did after he died was to get all these films, which were in canisters and boxes. My mother had still kept it. Thankfully, got it away from him because I'm sure he would have trashed it. And I was able to spend a month putting this on a projector, projecting to a wall, and filming with a DSLR camera, getting all that footage. Adjusting for flicker rate and all these things. Had to do a lot of work to do this, but I got 5 hours worth of video from when we were kids, and I've put this up on YouTube. So now my next question I'm going to ask you is, would you be interested in seeing any of this video? Because I'm thinking of taking little clips out here and there, from my life as a kid, and you can see a bit of my background and history growing up in Edmonton, Canada, from Super 8. It's really amazing, to see all this again, and I'm really glad that my mother kept it stored well, as it's pretty rare. I didn't know of anybody who was filming their families like this in the '70s. So that was really a great thing that my dad did, and I'm glad that I got this all done on YouTube. And it's sort of sitting up there now in, you know, like 3-hour chunks, and it's private because I just sent it to family. But I'm thinking of start taking little clips out of it and putting them up, so you can see a bit of my background. It's fun to watch. Anyway, so back to guitar. I end up getting the electric, and so from that point on, end of '75, then I was heavily into getting really seriously into guitar. So I had my first band in '76. It was just me and a drummer friend from school. So we just played things like Smoke on the Water and Wipeout and Boney Maroney, and yeah, just amp cranked up with the drums. And that was my first band. I mean, that just was for fun. You know, we played in the basement, and my dad would record it with his mics from the 8-track recorder. So I still have some of these recordings as well. But so around '75, and then I started finally getting albums in '78, and then it went to the next level, where it was like, okay, now I've got this Jeff Beck album, and I can sit down, and I was still using my dad's record player, because it was in the living room in this big, you know, wooden shelf unit, all that stuff. So I had to sit there on my hands and knees in front of the turntable that was hidden away in the bottom shelf of this wall unit, back and forth with the needle, back and forth. And so that's what I spent, you know, years doing, and learning these songs, Scorpions, UFO, you know, Jeff Beck, Rush, Rory Gallagher, whatever I was buying at the time. I would eventually start learning the songs. So then I got my own stereo in like 1980, probably for graduation, I'm thinking. I got a TAC turntable and the speakers and a receiver. And then I was using that in my own room, which was great. I had more time to sit there and do the needle thing. And then eventually I got a cassette deck and started transferring all my records to cassettes. And that, of course, went on for like at least 15 years. Well, cassettes were big, you know, from like 1980 to mid-90s. And then CDs were coming in actually already a lot earlier, like '86. But I ended up working in a music store in '86 here in Vancouver, down there. It's called Breeze Record Rentals, and we rented albums out because we didn't have CDs yet. So people were taking these albums home and recording them onto cassette, and it would be like $1 a rental. So they eventually started getting CDs in, and then I would get to take all this stuff home for free since I was working there. I didn't have to pay for it. And then I went nuts on everything because they had thousands of albums. So I got exposed to even more music, way beyond guitar music. And I had jazz and Miles Davis, and anything I felt like checking out, I could take it home. And if I liked it, I would record it. So the cassettes piled up, like hundreds of them for 15 years. I eventually threw them all out because nobody was using cassettes anymore. They had gone digital already, by 2000, early 2000s. So that was the how it went with the guitar. First, it was like a very slow thing with lessons and not much interest, and then once I got my electric, it starts to go up, and then goes up even more in '78 when I'm getting all the Rolling Stones albums, and then that learning pace continued pretty heavy until the mid '80s, till the late '80s. I was still just learning complicated guitar songs from like Steve Morse and Steve Vai and all these guys, and then eventually I got tired of that and finally started doing my own thing. So that probably would have been around the late 1990s where I really started recording with a digital unit, which was expensive at that time, and putting my own ideas down. So just over 20 years, really, full blast now on doing my own thing. So I'm not really into doing covers anymore. I've actually had some gig offers to play privately, and I'm a little hesitant to do them now because it just means having to play covers again. And I'm not crazy about sitting down and learning covers. I'm just more into doing my own thing and jamming, which is what you're seeing now on all my tracks going up. Long jams and just sitting there getting into it. So that's sort of my history of music and guitar. 48 years of playing, still learning, still improving. not much of a theory head. I know very little about theory, but it's not that important. The other thing's much more important than theory. Okay, and I also wanted to talk about my health. As you know, I had an aneurysm in April. Well, some good news. I had my CT scan last month, the follow-up, and I got a letter from the surgeon stating that everything was A-OK in my brain. There was no further problems that they could see on the CAT scan. So I won't have to do that again for another 5 years, and that's great. So I haven't been having any pain. I've still got that nice dent right here where my skull caved in. But another big thing, the last few days, I noticed, I had some itching. The scalp started itching even more, and I knew that was a good sign that the feeling was returning. So it was like really heavy, like yesterday or the day before yesterday. We were out cycling and my helmet on. I constantly wanted to get in there and scratch. Well, now I can actually feel most of my scalp here. It's pretty well returned because I can pinch with my nail and it actually hurts. A week or two ago, there was still no feeling there. And so that's been almost 4 months. It was like early April 2nd or 3rd that I had the aneurysm. So yeah, we're going now on the end of July. So I'm really glad that feeling has come back in my scalp. I wasn't sure how long it was going to take. So that was the first, those were both really good news. And the other thing I'm going to mention is that talking about my videos and how YouTube channel is going. Well, right now it's going actually slow. Things have slowed down a lot in July, and I probably attribute that to in summertime, people are out. But my views dropped quite a bit. I think I was down to like 10,000 a day when, a few weeks ago it was like 100,000 a day. And so people are outside enjoying the summer. So what I wanted to do, and I was talking about this before, is like how many videos am I putting up? I was putting up 1 a day. Well, I've decided that's way too many. And it's just going to be overkill. People are probably going to say, oh no, he's released another video. I barely got to see the last one. So I think I'm going to cut it down to 3 a week now. And nothing on the weekend and just during the weekdays. So you can tell me what you think about that, if that's a good thing or not a good thing to have less videos going up. Because I really don't know how long I can keep up this pace. So most people are doing like once or twice a week at the most. So I'm going to cut it down and see how it goes. So as far as busking goes, I am obviously not busking, and I probably won't return to busking. People have been asking me about this, and sometimes they see my videos and think I'm still busking, but these are like 2 years old. I am likely not going to go back to it because of it being too much stress and not enough reward. I mean, there were good things that happened, but generally it was a lot of work for very little reward. Plus the stress of dealing with the area I was in, drunks, drug addicts, aggressive pedestrians, getting screamed at, the noise, pollution. All that, I'm sure, helped attribute to my brain aneurysm that I had this year. It's this kind of building up of stress over various years of doing it. So I'm probably not going to do it again unless I get paid well to go up, to be out there. I'm happy just playing now at home where I can concentrate on my videos and make sure I'm playing to the best of my abilities without being interrupted or distractions. So I'm going to continue posting those busking videos because I have a backlog of them. So you'll still be seeing them for quite a while. And for people who are enjoying that street shows, you'll at least have that, and that'll be mixed in with my at-home videos. So I'll be rotating it, street video and then a couple from home. Band videos will continue as well, since I have a lot of that material. I've also added a new link in my description and comments. Before, I would always put in my support links as like 5 lines of different things. So you'd have PayPal tip, Patreon support, Bandcamp, buy me a coffee, t-shirts. So it's this sort of big chunk of things. Well, I've managed to put it now into one link. It's called a bio link. So when you click that, you will just see the 5 options from each support thing that you can go to. So let me know what you think about that, if that is actually easier, because it takes up less room now in the description and in the comment section. It's like, okay, 5 ways to support, just click on that and then you can see. So I'm hoping this will go over well. You know, there's really not much else I can think of putting in there. So yeah, that's about it, I think, for the update. So I hope you enjoyed this bit of history, musical history, and my health update. So yeah, check out my links, and again, I do not ask you to like or subscribe. Never going to happen. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next update.